Hey everyone! If you enjoy these story videos, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Your support means the world and keeps us creating more amazing stories every week. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. Ethan, a man sculpted by his own relentless pursuit of unadulterated freedom, considered himself a connoisseur of the unbound life. His apartment, a temple to bachelorhood, was a testament to his philosophies, a sprawling, minimalist space where the only constant was change and the only commitment was to himself. Sunlight, when it deigned to grace his windows, illuminated a scene of blissful disarray, a half-eaten pizza box from a late-night gaming session, a meticulously organized collection of vinyl records, and a sofa that bore the subtle indentations of countless hours spent immersed in virtual worlds or binge-watching obscure documentaries. His mornings were a luxurious ballet of self-indulgence, waking up whenever his body decreed, often well past noon, the world outside a mere hum against the serenity of his personal sanctuary. He'd stretch, languidly, like a contented cat, before embarking on his daily rituals, a strong brew of single-origin coffee, a quick browse of tech blogs, and perhaps a spontaneous decision to hit the gym or meet up with friends for an impromptu lunch. Children? The very thought sent a shiver down his spine, a visceral rejection of the noise, the demands, the sheer, unyielding responsibility they embodied. He'd often quipped to his equally footloose friends, "Kids? No thanks. My freedom is my prized possession. No tiny tyrants dictating my schedule, no sleepless nights, no endless cycle of nappies and tantrums. Just pure, unadulterated, glorious me time." He genuinely believed he had cracked the code to ultimate happiness, a life unburdened by the emotional and logistical shackles that seemed to entangle so many of his peers. His existence was a carefully curated symphony of choices, all designed to maximize his personal pleasure and minimize external obligations. Across town, Claire's mornings were a stark, jarring counterpoint to Ethan's tranquil idyll. Her world was a relentless, high-speed chase against the clock, a daily marathon of maternal duties and professional demands. The alarm clock, a cruel and unyielding mistress, shrieked its command at 5:30 a.m., plunging her into the chaotic reality of single parenthood. Lily, her spirited 5-year-old daughter, was a whirlwind of innocent energy, a miniature human alarm clock who often woke before the actual one. The air in their cozy, but perpetually slightly too small apartment was thick with the scent of toast, often burnt in her haste, the clatter of cutlery, and the insistent chatter of a child eager to start her day. "Mommy, can I wear my unicorn socks today? Mommy, I don't like this cereal. Mommy, where's Mr. Snuggles?" Each question, each demand, a small pebble added to the ever-growing pile of tasks she had to complete before 8 a.m. Breakfast was a battle, getting Lily dressed a negotiation, and brushing teeth a minor diplomatic incident. Then came the frantic dash out the door, Lily's backpack slung precariously over one shoulder, Claire's work bag digging into the other. The morning commute was a special kind of purgatory, bumper-to-bumper traffic, the incessant honking of impatient drivers, and the gnawing anxiety of being late to work. And inevitably, she was late. Her boss, a man whose patience was as thin as his hairline, would greet her with a curt nod and a look that spoke volumes of his disapproval. Her desk, buried under a mountain of paperwork, awaited her, a monument to the endless cycle of tasks that never seemed to diminish. Claire, a dedicated and intelligent professional, often found herself stifled by the sheer exhaustion that defined her existence. She loved Lily fiercely, with a boundless, unconditional love that transcended every challenge, but the relentless pace of her life had begun to chip away at her spirit. Sleep was a luxury, personal time a distant memory, and the dream of a quiet, uninterrupted moment to herself felt like a fantastical tale from another universe. Her days were a blur of spreadsheets, school runs, dinner preparations, bedtime stories, and then, finally, collapsing into bed, only to rise and repeat the same exhausting routine the next day. The concept of freedom for Claire was an abstract painting, glimpsed only in the fleeting moments when Lily finally fell asleep, leaving a silence that felt both precious and profoundly lonely. Their paths, disparate as they were destined to collide, like two opposing forces drawn together by an unseen current. It happened on a crisp autumn evening, under the luminous gaze of a full moon, its silvery light casting an almost magical glow over the bustling city. Ethan, feeling particularly buoyant after a successful online gaming session and a casual hookup, decided to treat himself to an artisanal coffee from a trendy downtown cafe. He strode in, his usual air of nonchalant confidence about him, surveying the scene with a practiced eye. He spotted a free table near the window, perfect for people watching, and made his way towards it. Just as he was about to settle down, a piercing wail ripped through the relatively serene atmosphere of the cafe. It was Lily, in full tantrum mode, protesting loudly against her mother's refusal to buy her a rainbow-colored cupcake. Claire, already at the precipice of a full-blown stress meltdown after a particularly grueling day at work, was desperately trying to placate her daughter, her voice a strained whisper of reason against Lily's escalating cries. She felt the judgmental stares of other patrons, their silent disapproval a heavy weight on her already burdened shoulders. The air was thick with tension, and Claire felt a flush creeping up her neck. Ethan, ever the champion of his own peace, rolled his eyes. He hated public displays of anything, but especially of distressed children. He sighed dramatically, loud enough for Claire to hear, and muttered, "Seriously? Can't people control their kids? This is why I avoid anything with small humans. Total freedom killer." Claire, whose nerves were already frayed thinner than a spider's silk, snapped. She spun around, her eyes blazing with a mixture of exhaustion and righteous fury. "Freedom," she spat, her voice trembling slightly. "You think this is what freedom looks like? Dealing with a screaming child, after a 12-hour workday, just trying to get a moment's peace." She gestured wildly at Lily, who, startled by her mother's sudden outburst, momentarily ceased her wailing, her eyes wide with curiosity. "I wish you, Mr. Unbound and Free, could try being a mother for just one day. See how much you enjoy your freedom, then." Ethan, taken aback by her ferocity, scoffed. "And I wish you'd understand the simple joy of not having to deal with this chaos. My life is pure bliss without tiny dictators running it." He made a dismissive gesture towards Lily, who, sensing the tension, started to sniffle again, her lower lip trembling. As their heated exchange reached its crescendo, a sudden, blinding flash of lightning illuminated the cafe, momentarily plunging the space into an eerie white glow. Outside, thunder rumbled, a deep, resonant growl that shook the very foundations of the building. Simultaneously, with a clumsy jolt from the force of their argument, Ethan's freshly purchased coffee cup tumbled from his hand, sending a splash of hot, dark liquid directly onto Claire's pristine white blouse. The air crackled with an almost tangible energy, a strange confluence of their fervent wishes and the storm brewing outside. They both froze, staring at each other, the coffee stains spreading like an ink blot between them. The full moon, now unobscured by clouds, seemed to pour its entire luminescence into the cafe, washing over their stunned faces. And then, just as suddenly as it had arrived, the lightning faded, the thunder receded into a distant murmur, and the world seemed to return to its ordinary hum. But something had shifted, an almost imperceptible tremor in the fabric of reality. Neither of them knew it then, but their lives, so diametrically opposed, were about to be irrevocably intertwined, their wishes, spoken in anger and frustration, poised to become a bewildering, life-altering reality. The universe, it seemed, had decided to grant them their wildest, most unexpected desire. The next morning, as the first rays of dawn crept over the city, two souls stirred, unaware that their waking moments would usher in a new, bizarre, and utterly chaotic chapter of their lives. Ethan, in what he thought was his bed, stretched out a hand, only to feel the soft, unfamiliar texture of silk pajamas. And Claire, waking up in what she assumed was her own familiar bed, opened her eyes to the unfamiliar sight of a cluttered, slightly grimy ceiling and the distinct, unsettling aroma of stale pizza and gamer sweat. The switch, subtle and instantaneous, had been made. Their lives were about to be turned inside out, and neither of them had the faintest clue what awaited them in the wrong body. The first tendrils of dawn, usually a gentle invitation to another day of blissful slumber for Ethan, instead brought with them an assault of unfamiliar sensations. He stirred, groggily, a vague sense of unease percolating through the fog of sleep. He reached out, expecting to feel the smooth, cool sheet of his king-sized bed, but his fingers brushed against something soft, lace-trimmed, and decidedly not his usual sleepwear. A jolt of confusion, then alarm, shot through him. He sat upright, his heart beginning to pound a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The room around him was not his sleek, minimalist haven. Instead, it was a cozy, somewhat cluttered space, adorned with whimsical fairy lights and a framed drawing of a smiling unicorn. A small, neatly made single bed occupied one corner, and the air smelled faintly of lavender and something sweet, like children's shampoo. This was definitely not his apartment. Panic, cold and sharp, began to claw at his throat. Where was he? Had he been kidnapped? Drugged? He swung his legs out of bed, intending to stand, but his feet, encased in soft, pink slippers, felt strangely small, delicate. He looked down, and his breath hitched. His legs, usually sinewy and lightly muscled, were slender, smooth, and unmistakably feminine. He traced the curve of his calf, then his thigh, with a trembling hand. A wave of nausea washed over him. This wasn't right. This wasn't him. He stumbled towards the full-length mirror on the closet door, his reflection an alien vision that stole the air from his lungs. Staring back at him was not his own ruggedly handsome face, but the softer, more refined features of Claire. Her dark, expressive eyes, her slightly worried frown lines, her cascade of chestnut hair, it was all there, perfectly rendered, perfectly wrong. He reached up, touching the unfamiliar curve of her jawline, running his fingers over the faint freckles on her nose. He even noticed the subtle stretch marks on her abdomen, a testament to a life he'd never lived, a body that had housed a child. No, 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 and oh, he gasped, the sound a high-pitched, unfamiliar squeak that was definitely not his deep baritone. His voice, too, had changed, rising an octave, becoming softer, more melodic. He tried to yell, to scream, to unleash the primal terror gripping him, but only a strangled, pathetic cry emerged. He was trapped. Trapped in a woman's body, a body he instinctively knew belonged to the infuriatingly frazzled mother from the coffee shop. Just as the full horror of his predicament began to sink in, a small, angelic voice sliced through his panic. "Mommy? Is it morning yet?" Ethan froze, every muscle tensed. He spun towards the sound, his eyes wide, his heart hammering. A small figure, still half asleep, with a messy tangle of blonde hair, was peeking out from under a unicorn-themed duvet. Lily, Claire's daughter. His daughter, now. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Not only was he a woman, he was a mother. A mother with a 5-year-old child who was now looking at him, her, with innocent, trusting eyes. "Mommy, I'm hungry," Lily mumbled, rubbing her eyes with a tiny fist. Ethan's mind went blank. What did mothers do? He hadn't a clue. His experience with children extended only to successfully avoiding them. He fumbled for words, his throat dry. Yes, sweetie, it's morning." His voice cracked, an unconvincing imitation of maternal warmth. Lily, oblivious to the internal meltdown occurring in her mother's body, skipped out of bed, her small feet pattering across the floor. "Can we have pancakes today? With extra syrup." Pancakes? Ethan had never made a pancake in his life. His culinary skills began and ended with ordering takeout or microwaving a frozen meal. He tried to recall anything he'd ever seen mothers do in movies or on TV. They smiled. They hugged. They cooked. He forced a strained smile onto Claire's face, a contortion that felt utterly alien. "Pancakes, honey, of course," he stammered, his mind racing. He vaguely remembered seeing a box of pancake mix in Claire's pantry during their brief, chaotic encounter at the cafe. Had that actually happened? Or was he dreaming? The cold sweat on his brow told him this was horrifyingly real. He stumbled into the kitchen, the layout of which was completely foreign. Lily, meanwhile, was already chattering away, recounting a dream about a flying cat. Ethan, his attention split between trying to comprehend this surreal nightmare and locating the coffee maker, barely registered a word. He found the pancake mix, a jug of milk, and some eggs. He followed the instructions on the box, which seemed simple enough. Add milk and egg, whisk. But his hands, these unfamiliar, slender hands, felt clumsy, uncoordinated. He poured the milk, but too much, then cracked an egg, only to have a piece of shell fall into the batter. He cursed under his breath, a low growl that caused Lily to look up, her brow furrowed. "Mommy, did you say a bad word?" "No, sweetie. Just, a cough," he lied, forcing another grotesque smile. He tried to whisk, but the batter sloshed over the sides of the bowl. He placed a frying pan on the stove, turned on the heat, and poured a dollop of the lumpy mixture. It immediately began to smoke. He panicked, grabbing a spatula and trying to flip it, but the pancake tore, sticking to the pan. A plume of acrid smoke filled the kitchen, setting off the smoke alarm, which shrieked its piercing warning. "Mommy, what's that noise?" Lily wailed, clapping her hands over her ears. It's fine. Just a little culinary mishap." Ethan shouted over the din, frantically fanning the smoke with a dish towel. He finally managed to turn off the alarm, but not before burning the first batch of pancakes to a crisp. The kitchen was a disaster, and Lily was now on the verge of tears. He salvaged a few half-decent pancakes from the third attempt, presenting them to Lily with a flourish that masked his utter despair. He watched, aghast, as she slathered them with syrup, a sticky, sugary mess. Next came getting Lily ready for school. This was a whole new level of hell. "Mommy, I can't find my sparkly socks." "Mommy, my hair's all knotty." "Mommy, can you tie my shoelaces?" Ethan, who had never tied a shoelace in his life, he preferred slip-ons, struggled with the intricate knots, his fingers feeling like sausages. He then tried to brush Lily's hair, but his movements were too rough, pulling at her tender scalp, eliciting another series of protests. In a moment of sheer desperation, he grabbed a tube from the bathroom counter, assuming it was toothpaste. "Here, sweetie, brush your teeth while I deal with this hair," he said, handing it to her. Lily squeezed a dollop onto her brush and a sweet, floral scent wafted up. It was only when Lily looked up, her mouth full of white foam, and said, "Mommy, this tastes like flowers," that Ethan realized, to his horror, he had given her Claire's expensive facial moisturizer. The drive to Lily's preschool was a blur of backseat demands and Ethan's white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel, his mind still reeling from the events of the morning. When they finally arrived, a gaggle of mothers was already gathered outside, chatting animatedly. Ethan, cloaked in Claire's body, felt a surge of social anxiety he hadn't experienced since high school. He hated small talk, hated forced pleasantries. He just wanted to drop Lily off and escape. But Lily, seeing her friends, dragged him towards the group. "Mommy, can I play with Maya?" she chirped. Before Ethan could nod, a woman with perfectly coiffed hair and a designer handbag turned to him. "Claire, darling. You look absolutely radiant today. So fresh-faced." "Did you get some extra sleep?" she purred, her eyes scanning him with an unnerving intensity. Ethan's face, Claire's face, flushed a deep crimson. He stammered, yes. Radiant. Plenty of sleep. Definitely not, a complete disaster." He tried to sound normal, but his voice wobbled, and his eyes darted nervously around the group. Another mother chimed in, "Oh, I was just telling Sarah how youthful you're looking, Claire. What's your secret? Spill." Ethan, utterly bewildered by the sudden onslaught of female camaraderie and intrusive questions, mumbled something about good genes and plenty of water, his discomfort palpable. He felt like an imposter, a poorly acted caricature of a mother. He hastily said his goodbyes, practically shoving Lily into the school and making a swift exit, leaving a trail of baffled mothers in his wake. Work was an entirely different kind of torment. Claire's job, it turned out, involved complex spreadsheets, client reports, and endless meetings. Ethan, whose professional life consisted primarily of freelance coding and gaming journalism, understood precisely none of it. He sat at Claire's desk, surrounded by unfamiliar files and the incessant hum of office chatter, his mind a complete blank. Her boss, a stern-faced woman named Ms. Albright, immediately summoned him, to her office, admonishing him, for being late and demanding an update on a crucial project. Ethan could only stare blankly, his mouth agape. Project? What project? Is it, a game? He blurted out, earning a thunderous glare from Ms. Albright. His colleagues, a group of women who seemed to communicate in an intricate web of passive-aggressive glances and whispered gossip, tried to engage him, in conversation about office politics and the latest client drama. He responded with monosyllabic grunts and bewildered stares, making a spectacular desk disaster of every task he attempted. Emails went unanswered, reports were misfiled, and a critical presentation ended in a series of unintelligible jargon and a bewildered silence from the client. He felt a profound, suffocating sense of inadequacy. Claire's life was not the carefree existence he had imagined. It was a relentless treadmill of responsibilities, each one more daunting than the last. That evening, after another chaotic school pickup and a valiant, though ultimately failed, attempt at cooking a healthy dinner, which resulted in burnt pasta and a suspiciously green-tinged chicken, Lily started to cry. It wasn't a tantrum cry, it was a soft, heartbroken whimper. "I miss my mommy," she whispered, her small voice thick with tears. "I want my real mommy." Ethan's heart, usually a self-proclaimed fortress against sentimentality, ached with a strange, unfamiliar pang. He tried everything, offering her ice cream, promising a new toy, even attempting a terrible rendition of a lullaby. Nothing worked. Lily just curled into a ball, her sobs shaking her small frame. He felt utterly helpless, a complete failure. He had always dismissed children as noisy, demanding creatures, but seeing Lily's raw vulnerability, her genuine grief, chipped away at his carefully constructed indifference. In a moment of pure desperation, remembering how he often calmed himself with distractions, he grabbed Claire's phone and quickly searched YouTube for kids' superhero videos. He found one featuring a cartoon character called Captain Courage, a brightly animated hero who rescued kittens and stopped mischievous villains. He put it on, hoping it would provide a temporary reprieve. Lily, still sniffling, watched the screen, her eyes wide. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, her sobs began to subside. Then, an idea struck him. "Hey Lily," he said, trying to infuse his voice with an energy he didn't feel. "Look, Captain Courage needs a sidekick. Do you think you could be a super helper?" He made a silly face, flexing Claire's slender arm in a comical attempt at strength. Lily giggled. A tiny, fragile giggle, but a giggle nonetheless. She looked at him, through her tear-filled eyes, a glimmer of hope returning. "I'm not strong like Captain Courage," she whispered. "Oh, yes you are," Ethan insisted, feeling a surge of something akin to genuine connection. "You're super brave. You went to school today even though you missed mommy. That's super strength. And you can help Captain Courage save the day by giving him a big smile." He flashed another goofy grin, his heart pounding with an unexpected adrenaline rush. Lily's lips curved upwards, a small, tentative smile that slowly blossomed into a full, radiant grin. She clapped her hands. "I can be super Lily," she declared, her tears forgotten. Ethan, watching her laugh, felt a warmth spread through his chest, a sensation he hadn't known was possible. It wasn't the fleeting satisfaction of winning a game or closing a deal, it was something deeper, more profound. It was the warmth of having brought joy to a child, of having eased her sadness, of having, for a brief moment, been her superhero. In that moment, surrounded by the lingering scent of burnt dinner and the faint echoes of the smoke alarm, Ethan, in Claire's body, understood something fundamental. This little girl, this tiny, vulnerable human, wasn't a burden, she was a miracle. And for the very first time in his life, He felt a flicker of something truly beautiful, something that stirred his soul in a way his unbound existence never had. He reached out and gently stroked Lily's hair, a soft, unfamiliar gesture that felt surprisingly natural. Across town, in what was now Ethan's apartment, Claire awoke with a start. Her eyes, accustomed to the soft, floral patterns of her own bedroom wallpaper, blinked against the jarring reality of a poster of a futuristic spaceship adorning the ceiling directly above her. Confusion, then a creeping sense of unfamiliarity, began to bloom in her chest. She stretched, expecting the familiar give of her old mattress, but instead felt the firm, slightly worn springs of a bed that smelled vaguely of stale pizza and a musky, masculine scent. Her hand brushed against a rough, stubbled jawline. Wait, what? She bolted upright, her heart leaping into her throat. This was not her bed. This was not her room. The apartment was a chaotic symphony of bachelor living, a coffee table laden with empty beer bottles, discarded gaming controllers, and a half-eaten bag of chips. A massive, state-of-the-art gaming PC glowed ominously in the corner, its screens displaying a paused, blood-splattered battle scene. Clothes lay scattered across a worn armchair, and a faint, sweet sickly aroma of an air freshener attempting to mask something less pleasant hung in the air. This was undeniably a man's apartment. And not just any man, but the arrogant, infuriating man from the coffee shop. Ethan. She scrambled out of bed, her legs feeling strangely long, her movements surprisingly agile. She stumbled towards a full-length mirror, her breath catching in her throat. Staring back at her was Ethan's face, his sharp, angular jaw, his dark, slightly unkempt hair, the confident, almost smug set of his mouth that she now recognized from their heated encounter. She touched the stubble on his chin, the strong, defined muscles of his arms. Her voice, when she finally managed to articulate a sound, was a deep, resonant rumble, utterly alien to her own melodic tones. No way, she whispered, the words sounding guttural and foreign coming from her lips. This can't be happening. A whirlwind of emotions hit her, disbelief, a terrifying surge of fear, and then, slowly, a flicker of something else. Freedom. Unadulterated, intoxicating freedom. For the first time in 5 years, she wasn't waking up to the insistent demands of a small child, the relentless pressure of a schedule dictated by another human being. The silence in the apartment was profound, almost deafening, after years of constant background noise. No urgent calls for mommy, no frantic search for matching socks, no burnt toast. Just silence. And her. Alone. She walked slowly through the spacious apartment, taking in the details. It was messy, yes, but it was his mess, not a child's toy explosion. There was no tiny artwork taped to the fridge, no brightly colored plastic cups. It was a space designed for one, and for one alone. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Claire felt an exhilarating lightness in her chest. She could do whatever she wanted, whenever she wanted. A faint grumble from his stomach reminded her that she hadn't eaten. She opened the fridge, expecting to see a neatly organized array of healthy snacks and Lily's favorite yogurts. Instead, it was sparse, a leftover pizza box, a carton of milk, some beer, and a lonely, shriveled apple. Typical, she thought, a wry smile touching her lips. But she didn't have to make breakfast for anyone else. She didn't have to cajole a picky eater. She could just eat. Or not. She found a mug and brewed a strong cup of coffee, then sat on the sofa, sinking into its surprisingly comfortable cushions. She sipped her coffee slowly, savoring the warmth, the quiet, the sheer lack of urgency. She looked around the apartment, then out the window at the city waking up. No deadlines, no school run, no boss breathing down her neck. A deep sigh escaped her, a sound of pure, unadulterated relief. This was it. This was the freedom Ethan had so proudly proclaimed. And for a moment, it felt utterly glorious. She could take a long, hot shower for as long as she wanted, without fear of a child needing her or the hot water running out. She could put on some music loud, without worrying about waking anyone. She could simply be. She spent the next few hours indulging in these newfound luxuries. She took an incredibly long shower, reveling in the feeling of hot water cascading over her, his broad shoulders, using Ethan's surprisingly masculine-scented shower gel. She put on some jazz music, loud enough to fill the apartment, and danced around the living room in just a towel, something she hadn't done since her early 20s. She even tried on some of Ethan's clothes, a comfortable pair of sweatpants and a soft, oversized t-shirt, finding a strange pleasure in the loose, unrestricted fit. For a blissful period, the weight of years of responsibility seemed to lift, replaced by an intoxicating sense of liberation. She ate breakfast at her own pace, browsing through a stack of Ethan's gaming magazines, trying to understand the arcane language of pixels and processors. But then, as the morning stretched into early afternoon, a subtle shift began to occur. The initial euphoria, the giddy sense of escape, slowly began to dissipate, replaced by a growing stillness, a quiet emptiness. The vast, unmarred expanse of me-time began to feel less like a canvas of opportunity and more like a blank wall. The silence, which had initially been a balm, now started to feel heavy, almost oppressive. There was no small voice chattering in the background, no tiny hands reaching for hers, no soft giggles to punctuate the quiet. Her thoughts, usually fragmented and scattered by the demands of her day, now had room to breathe, to expand. And as they did, a familiar ache, a deep yearning, began to surface. She found herself wondering about Lily. Was she okay? Had she eaten her breakfast? Was she having fun at preschool? A pang of guilt, sharp and insistent, pierced through her newfound freedom. She had never been away from Lily for so long, not without knowing exactly where she was and who she was with. The thought of Lily, potentially upset or confused, sent a wave of anxiety through her. Just as the silence in the apartment started to press down on her, the doorbell rang, startling her. She opened it to find two men standing on the landing, grinning broadly. "Ethan, my man." Ready for a legendary afternoon of gaming and debauchery, one of them boomed, clapping him, on the shoulder. It was Mark and Dave, Ethan's best friends. Claire, still reeling from the unexpected social interaction, managed a weak smile. Hey guys," she mumbled, her voice feeling strange and uncooperative. They strode in, making themselves at home, immediately heading for the gaming setup. "Dude, you look a little pale," Mark observed, narrowing his eyes. "Too much late-night hacking at virtual aliens?" Claire forced a laugh, a dry, grating sound. "Something like that," she replied. She reluctantly joined them, attempting to engage in their conversation about obscure game lore and the latest tech gadgets. They talked about their single and loving it lives, recounting wild party stories and bragging about their latest conquests. They were loud, boisterous, and utterly absorbed in their own world. Claire listened, a faint smile plastered on Ethan's face, but her heart felt heavy. She saw the superficiality of their conversations, the endless pursuit of fleeting pleasures, the careful avoidance of anything remotely deep or meaningful. They were, in essence, grown-up versions of her previous, less mature self, living lives devoid of genuine connection. "Man, nothing beats the single life, right, Ethan?" Dave exclaimed, clinking his beer bottle against hers, his. "No nagging wives, no screaming kids. Just pure, unadulterated freedom." Claire looked at him, then at Mark, then at the cluttered, impersonal space around them. A hollow laugh escaped her. "Pure freedom," she echoed, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. She felt a profound sense of sadness wash over her. This wasn't freedom, it was emptiness. It was a life lived for superficial thrills, carefully insulated from the messy, beautiful complexities of genuine human connection. Later that evening, after Mark and Dave had left, leaving behind an even greater trail of discarded snacks and empty bottles, the apartment felt colder, more desolate than before. Claire sat alone on the sofa, staring at the muted television screen, a profound sense of isolation settling over her. She picked up Ethan's phone, idly scrolling through his contacts. She saw names like gaming crew, bar buddy, tech guy. No mom or dad. No sister or brother. It was a network built on shared interests and casual acquaintances, not deep familial bonds. Suddenly, the phone rang, startling her. It was Mom, Ethan's mother. Claire hesitated for a moment, then answered, her voice a rough imitation of Ethan's. Ethan? Is that you, dear? You sound different. Are you finally going to tell me you're settling down? Getting a proper job? Finding a nice girl? When are you going to grow up, son? Ethan's mother's voice, though tinged with love, was laced with a familiar exasperation, a palpable longing for her son to embrace a more conventional, adult life. Claire listened, a strange empathy blooming in her chest. She heard the unspoken hopes, the gentle criticisms, the underlying current of worry in his mother's voice. She understood then why Ethan might retreat into his world of games and superficial friendships. It wasn't just about freedom, it was about avoiding expectation, avoiding the perceived judgment of those who wanted him to be someone he wasn't. He was running from something, not just running towards pleasure. He was running from responsibility, yes, but also from the vulnerability that came with deep connection, with allowing someone to truly see him, flaws and all. Claire, as a mother, understood the desperate hope of a parent for their child's happiness and fulfillment, even if that child resisted their definition of it. She felt a strange surge of protectiveness for the confused, commitment-phobic man whose body she now inhabited. His life, from the outside, seemed so enviable, so free. But from the inside, she could see the hollow spaces, the silent cries for something more. She ended the call, the lingering echoes of his mother's words hanging in the air. As night fell, Claire found herself craving the comforting chaos of her own life, the noisy demands of her daughter, the warmth of a loving embrace, even the relentless exhaustion. The freedom she had so desperately wished for, the life Ethan had so zealously cultivated, now felt like a gilded cage, beautiful on the outside, but ultimately empty within. She missed Lily's bright smile, the soft weight of her head on her shoulder, the simple joy of reading a bedtime story. She missed the feeling of being needed, of being loved unconditionally. The apartment, once a symbol of liberation, now felt like a monument to solitude. The truth, stark and undeniable, settled deep in her soul. True freedom wasn't the absence of responsibility, it was the ability to choose what you cherished and to embrace the beautiful, messy, often exhausting reality that came with it. And for Claire, that choice was and always would be Lily. The days that followed the initial, cataclysmic body swap plunged both Ethan and Claire into a surreal and increasingly challenging existence, forcing them to confront the stark realities of each other's lives. The initial shock began to wear off, replaced by a grueling routine of improvisation and desperate attempts at normalcy. The universe, it seemed, was determined to teach them a lesson, and it was doing so with a mischievous, almost cruel, sense of humor. Ethan, still trapped in Claire's body, found himself navigating the treacherous waters of single motherhood with the grace of a bull in a china shop. Every morning was a fresh hell of burnt food, misplaced school supplies, and Lily's endlessly energetic demands. He was constantly running late, constantly flustered, and perpetually on the verge of a panic attack. The carefully curated indifference he once held for children was slowly, painstakingly, eroding with each sticky hug and each tearful plea from Lily. His attempts at parenting were a source of constant amusement for Lily, though they terrified him. He learned, through trial and error, and many YouTube tutorials covertly watched on Claire's phone, how to braid hair, albeit with varying degrees of success that often left Lily with a lopsided ponytail. He discovered the subtle art of distraction, turning a potential tantrum over a dropped ice cream into an impromptu, superhero training session. He even managed to master a few of Lily's favorite bedtime stories, albeit with overly dramatic voices and sound effects that often made Lily giggle instead of sleep. One particularly memorable morning, Ethan was attempting to make Lily's favorite rainbow pancakes. Distracted by a work email, Claire's work, of course, which he was still struggling to comprehend, he accidentally added salt instead of sugar to the batter. The resulting pancakes were a culinary abomination. Lily, taking her first bite, scrunched up her face. "Mommy, these taste funny," she declared, spitting it out. Ethan, mortified, quickly whipped up a bowl of cereal, promising rainbow cereal, for breakfast instead. He then spent the rest of the morning trying to subtly wipe away the salty residue from the pan, convinced that his incompetence would lead to Lily developing an aversion to all cooked food. His office life as Claire was a continuous charade. He spent hours each day pretending to understand complex financial reports, nodding sagely in meetings while his mind was actually replaying last night's attempts to get Lily to sleep. His colleagues, initially intrigued by Claire's new, edgy vibe, as one colleague, Brenda, put it, were now exchanging worried glances. "Claire seems off, doesn't she?" Brenda whispered to another colleague during a coffee break, eyeing Ethan, Claire, who was attempting to open a jar of pickles with extreme difficulty. "Like she's lost her touch. And her fashion sense. What happened to her sensible blouses?" Ethan, meanwhile, was silently cursing the pickle jar and lamenting Claire's preference for blouses over his usual comfortable t-shirts. He started to notice the little details of Claire's life, the unseen burdens. The carefully budgeted groceries, the worn-out shoes that Claire couldn't afford to replace, the constant worry etched into his face whenever bills arrived. He saw the struggle, the tireless effort, the quiet sacrifices Claire made every single day for Lily. It was a stark contrast to his own life of impulsive purchases and unquestioning comfort. The freedom he once celebrated now felt selfish, almost vulgar, in comparison. One afternoon, while picking Lily up from school, he encountered Mrs. Henderson, a notoriously gossipy and overbearing mother. "Claire, dear, I just saw Lily trying to climb the flagpole again," Mrs. Henderson said, a disapproving glint in her eye. "You really must teach her some discipline. Children need boundaries, you know." Ethan's usual response would have been a sarcastic retort, but something stopped him. He saw the genuine concern, albeit misguided, in Mrs. Henderson's eyes. He also saw the slight tremble in Lily's lip as she clutched Claire's hand. "Thank you for your concern, Mrs. Henderson," he said, his voice surprisingly calm. "Lily is just a very adventurous spirit. We're working on channeling that energy." He gave Lily a reassuring squeeze, a gesture that felt more natural with each passing day. He was becoming Claire, or at least, a version of Claire that was learning to protect her child. Meanwhile, Claire, inhabiting Ethan's body, continued her bewildered exploration of his bachelor existence. The initial thrill of freedom had long since evaporated, replaced by a growing sense of detachment and boredom. She found Ethan's life to be surprisingly hollow, filled with fleeting pleasures that left no lasting imprint. The endless gaming, the casual hookups, the late-night parties, they all felt meaningless without the grounding presence of love and responsibility. She tried to engage in Ethan's usual activities. She even attempted to play one of his elaborate video games, but the intricate controls and violent scenarios quickly overwhelmed her. She spent an entire afternoon trying to understand the sprawling fantasy world of his favorite RPG, only to give up in frustration, craving the simple satisfaction of a completed spreadsheet or a well-organized chore list. His friends, Mark and Dave, continued to drop by, eager for their usual banter and gaming sessions. Claire would sit through their conversations, feigning interest, but her mind would drift to Lily. She missed the simple joy of reading a picture book, the innocent questions, the warmth of a small hand in hers. One day, while tidying up Ethan's notoriously messy apartment, a habit she couldn't break, even in his body, she stumbled upon a dusty photo album tucked away in a drawer. It was filled with old pictures of Ethan as a child, smiling, mischievous, surrounded by a loving family. There were photos of him with his parents, their faces beaming with pride. One picture showed him as a teenager, arm in arm with a girl, both of them laughing. There was a genuine warmth in those old images, a sense of connection and belonging that seemed absent from his current life. She noticed the subtle shift in his expressions over the years, from open and joyful as a child to guarded and almost detached as an adult. It was as if he had gradually built a wall around himself, protecting himself from something. She remembered his mother's call, the desperate plea for him to grow up. Claire felt a pang of understanding. Ethan wasn't just avoiding responsibility, he was avoiding vulnerability. He had chosen a life of detachment as a shield, perhaps to protect himself from past hurts or the fear of failure. He projected an image of carefree freedom, but beneath it, Claire sensed a deep-seated loneliness, a yearning for something more substantial. Her colleagues, Ethan's now, were also noticing a change in Ethan. He was suddenly punctual, unusually polite, and even started bringing in homemade cookies. Claire's baking skills were much more refined than Ethan's. He even tried to initiate meaningful conversations, asking about their families and personal lives, something the real Ethan would never have done. "Dude, what's gotten into you?" Mark asked one evening, watching Ethan meticulously wash the dishes after they'd ordered takeout. "You're acting like a grown-up. It's kinda freaking me out." Claire just smiled faintly, a sad, knowing smile. She was witnessing firsthand the emptiness that lay beneath Ethan's carefully constructed facade of freedom. One afternoon, while sitting in a park near Ethan's apartment, trying to enjoy the sunshine and the quiet, Claire saw a young mother pushing a stroller, cooing at her baby. A wave of intense longing washed over her. She imagined Lily's face, her bright eyes, her infectious giggle. The freedom she possessed in Ethan's body felt heavy, like a beautiful, empty gift box. It offered nothing of the profound joy, the deep sense of purpose, that came with nurturing a child. She missed the constant demands, the sticky fingers, the sleepless nights, because they were all wrapped up in the boundless love she felt for Lily. The silence, once a luxury, was now a deafening reminder of what she had lost, even temporarily. She realized that the core of her identity wasn't just Claire, it was Mommy. It was the feeling of being needed, of having a profound impact on another human being's life, of nurturing, protecting, and loving without reservation. Ethan's life, while offering an abundance of personal space and lack of obligation, lacked that fundamental, human connection. It was a life built on avoidance, not engagement. As the days turned into weeks, a strange symbiosis began to form within their swapped lives. Ethan, grappling with the complexities of Claire's world, found himself softening, his cynical edges slowly rounding off. He was learning patience, empathy, and the profound, often exhausting, joy of self-sacrifice for another. He was becoming a mom, not just physically, but emotionally. And Claire, immersed in Ethan's world, was peeling back the layers of his carefully constructed independence, seeing the loneliness and the suppressed yearning for connection that lay beneath. She understood his fear, his retreat, but she also saw the immense potential for growth, for genuine happiness, if only he dared to step outside his comfort zone. The swap, initially a curse, was slowly transforming into a profound, life-altering lesson for both of them, challenging their deepest-held beliefs about what it meant to be truly free and truly fulfilled. The continuous, often hilarious, struggles of living each other's lives began to strip away their preconceived notions and defenses, revealing deeper layers of vulnerability for both Ethan and Claire. The initial chaos morphed into a strange rhythm, a bewildering dance of adaptation that forced them to see beyond the superficial facades they had both maintained. Ethan, now an accidental, albeit increasingly proficient, mother, was fully immersed in the relentless current of Claire's life. He still fumbled with braiding Lily's hair, often resulting in a messy bird's nest that Lily, with her boundless optimism, would proudly declare "my wild mommy hair." He still found himself accidentally using the wrong coffee mug at work, or responding to a colleague's gossip with a blank stare, but there was a noticeable shift. He was no longer just surviving, he was starting to engage. The biggest transformation was undoubtedly his relationship with Lily. The initial terror of having a child had gradually melted into a genuine, burgeoning affection. He found himself anticipating her morning greetings, savoring her innocent questions, and even enjoying the bedtime stories, complete with Claire's over-the-top character voices. He learned to differentiate between her hungry cry, her tired cry, and her just wants attention cry. He discovered the magic of a perfectly timed tickle fight to defuse a looming tantrum and the profound comfort of a warm hug when she was scared. He found himself increasingly protective of her, a feeling he never knew he possessed. One evening, after a particularly trying day at work, where he had barely managed to avoid a catastrophic error on a client report, Ethan returned home to find Lily unusually quiet. She was sitting on the floor, surrounded by her toys, but not playing. Her lower lip was trembling, and her eyes were suspiciously bright. "What's wrong, sweetie?" he asked, kneeling beside her, the question now coming naturally to him. Lily looked up, her small face crumpled. Maya said my mommy is weird, she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. She said you talk funny and you don't know anything about unicorns. Ethan's blood ran cold. He knew it was his awkwardness, his fish-out-of-water demeanor, that had prompted the comment. A wave of fierce protectiveness washed over him, eclipsing his own discomfort. He hugged Lily tightly, pulling her close. Hey, he murmured, gently stroking her hair. Your mommy isn't weird. Your mommy is special and smart. And she knows everything about the best super helpers like you. He then, to his own surprise, launched into an improvised tale about a secret agent unicorn who was shy but incredibly brave, just like Lily. He saw her eyes light up, her tears slowly drying. In that moment, he wasn't just pretending to be Claire. He was actively defending Claire's daughter, experiencing the fierce, unyielding love of a parent. He realized that this was what true responsibility felt like, not a burden, but a privilege. His work life, while still a struggle, also saw small improvements. He learned to delegate, to ask for help, and to admit when he didn't understand something the old Ethan would never have done. He found a surprisingly patient colleague, Sarah, who slowly began to guide him through the intricacies of Claire's job. During one particularly intense meeting, where he had to present a complex quarterly report, he surprised himself by channeling Claire's inner strength. He spoke with a newfound confidence, not entirely understanding the numbers, but projecting an air of competence that convinced everyone. He realized Claire was a formidable woman, capable of immense pressure, and he was, inadvertently, learning from her resilience. Meanwhile, Claire, still in Ethan's body, continued her solitary journey through his life. The initial novelty had long worn off, leaving behind a persistent ache of loneliness. She found herself yearning for the simple, structured chaos of her own home. Ethan's apartment, once a symbol of liberation, now felt like a mausoleum of missed connections. She tried to find something meaningful in Ethan's vast collection of games and tech. She even tried to understand the appeal of a complex online strategy game he was deeply invested in. She spent an entire afternoon watching one of his recorded gaming sessions, trying to comprehend the intricacies of pixelated warfare. But her mind kept drifting to Lily, to school projects, to the small, everyday details that made her own life so rich and full. His friends, Mark and Dave, continued their sporadic visits, dragging him, to bars and impromptu poker nights. Claire would sit amongst them, a forced smile on Ethan's face, listening to their banter. They talked about superficial conquests, about evading commitments, about the latest gadgets and the next big party. Claire felt a profound disconnect. Their conversations, once mildly amusing, now felt shallow. She tried to steer the conversation towards deeper topics, dreams, fears, family, but they would inevitably pivot back to the latest video game or a hilarious, to them, story about avoiding a persistent date. She realized that Ethan's freedom was built on a foundation of emotional distance. He avoided attachments, not because he genuinely disliked them, but because he was terrified of the vulnerability they entailed. One evening, after his friends had left, leaving behind the usual trail of empty cans and crumbs, Claire found herself staring at Ethan's phone again. She scrolled through his photos. Amidst the pictures of gaming setups and screenshots of impressive scores, she found a small folder labeled Old Stuff. She opened it, and her breath hitched. It was full of pictures of Ethan's family, his parents looking younger, his mother's smile bright. There were pictures of a family vacation, a birthday party, a graduation. In all of them, a younger Ethan was there, smiling, genuinely happy, surrounded by love. Then she saw one picture that stopped her cold. It was a photo of Ethan, perhaps in his late teens, standing next to a young woman, her arm linked through his. They were both laughing, their faces radiant. The look in Ethan's eyes was one of pure adoration, a depth of emotion she hadn't seen in any of his other photos. The next few pictures showed them together, growing up, always side by side, their connection palpable. The final picture in the series showed just Ethan, alone, his back to the camera, walking away from a beautiful, but clearly solemn, stone memorial. A date was visible. A date from several years ago. A wave of understanding, sharp and painful, washed over Claire. This was it. This was the wound. The carefully constructed walls, the relentless pursuit of superficial freedom, the avoidance of deep connection, it all stemmed from this loss. He hadn't just chosen a life without ties, he had retreated into it as a defense mechanism. He wasn't just avoiding the messiness of life, he was avoiding the pain of loss. Claire felt a profound surge of empathy for him. She knew what it felt like to lose someone, to experience that shattering grief. Lily's father had passed away when Lily was just a baby, leaving Claire with a similar gaping wound and the responsibility of raising a child alone. She understood, intimately, the urge to build walls, to protect oneself from the possibility of future heartbreak. In that quiet moment, sitting in Ethan's silent apartment, Claire felt a bond forming between them, a shared understanding of pain and loss, despite their vastly different coping mechanisms. Ethan's freedom was not a statement of superiority, it was a testament to his brokenness. He wasn't selfish, he was wounded. And for the first time, Claire didn't just resent him, she felt a deep, compassionate yearning to heal him. The constant, bewildering experience of living each other's lives was forcing them both to shed their preconceptions. Ethan was learning the profound, messy beauty of selfless love and the unwavering strength of a mother. Claire was learning the hidden depths of pain and vulnerability that lay beneath a seemingly carefree exterior. They were both seeing themselves and each other with new eyes, slowly dismantling the judgments and biases they had once held so fiercely. The body swap, initially a punishment, was slowly revealing itself to be a profound, unexpected journey of self-discovery and a surprising path to connection. They were becoming more human, more empathetic, more complete, through the lens of the other's struggles and silent suffering. The bizarre reality of their swapped lives continued to unfold, slowly but surely chipping away at the carefully constructed facades of both Ethan and Claire. The initial sense of bewilderment and even resentment began to give way to deeper introspection, forcing them to confront not only the challenges of the other's life, but also the shortcomings of their own. Ethan, now fully immersed in Claire's maternal existence, found himself experiencing a spectrum of emotions he never knew existed. The constant demands of Lily no longer felt like an imposition, but a natural part of his day. He developed a remarkable patience, a talent for storytelling, and an uncanny ability to soothe Lily's every woe. He discovered the subtle nuances of her personality, her quiet moments of thoughtfulness, her fierce determination when learning something new, and her boundless capacity for joy. He found himself thinking, how did I ever think children were just annoying? He learned that parenting wasn't about perfection, it was about presence. About showing up, day after day, with love and consistency. He still had his off days, of course. One morning, trying to make Lily's elaborate school lunch, complete with cut-out sandwiches and fruit skewers, he accidentally cut his finger with a kitchen knife. Lily, seeing the blood, immediately burst into tears, convinced her mommy was severely injured. Ethan, trying to calm her while simultaneously stanching the flow of blood, felt a surge of panic. But then he managed to laugh, a genuine, warm laugh that surprised even himself. "It's okay, little superhero," he said, holding up his bandaged finger. "Just a tiny boo-boo. Mommy's still strong." Lily giggled, a watery smile returning to her face. In that moment, Ethan realized that even his mistakes were opportunities for connection, for showing resilience. His work life, while still challenging, became less about survival and more about understanding. He started actively studying Claire's old reports, asking detailed questions to Sarah, and even staying late to catch up. He saw the sheer dedication Claire poured into her job, the responsibility she felt towards her clients and her team. He admired her intelligence and her unwavering work ethic, qualities he had previously dismissed as merely being busy. He realized that Claire wasn't just working to pay the bills, she was building a career, contributing meaningfully, and finding a sense of purpose beyond her family. The daily interactions with other mothers at school pickup, once a source of acute social anxiety, now held a strange allure. He found himself listening to their stories, their shared struggles and triumphs, with a newfound empathy. He even offered advice to a frazzled mother who was struggling to get her toddler to eat vegetables, drawing on his recent experience with Lily. "Try making it a game," he suggested, remembering his superhero strategy. "Tell them it's super strength broccoli that makes them fly." The mother looked at him, Claire, with surprise, then a grateful smile. Ethan felt a warm glow in his chest, the satisfaction of helping someone else, of being part of a community. He was slowly, organically, becoming the mom Claire was. Concurrently, Claire, experiencing life through Ethan's eyes, was undergoing her own profound awakening. The initial freedom had long curdled into a bitter understanding of his isolation. She observed his life not with envy, but with a deep, almost maternal concern. She saw the carefully constructed walls he had built, the way he deflected genuine emotion with sarcasm or humor, the subtle flinch when someone tried to get too close. She spent more time in Ethan's apartment, trying to understand his passions. She watched his video games, not just as entertainment, but as a window into his world. She realized that for him, these elaborate virtual universes were a form of escape, a place where he could exert control, where the rules were clear, and where emotional vulnerability was not a prerequisite for success. She saw the skill, the strategic thinking, and the dedication he put into his gaming. It wasn't just a frivolous pastime, it was his world, his comfort zone. His friends, Mark and Dave, continued to be a source of mild frustration and subtle insight. One evening, after a particularly loud poker game, Mark began to complain about his girlfriend, lamenting how she just didn't understand his need for space and freedom. Claire, listening from Ethan's perspective, heard the insecurity in his voice, the fear of commitment mirroring Ethan's own. She realized that Ethan wasn't alone in his avoidance. It was a common, if ultimately unfulfilling, coping mechanism among his peers. She felt a surge of sadness for them all, for the lost opportunities for deeper connection. The photo of Ethan with the young woman by the memorial haunted her. She knew it represented a profound loss, a turning point in his life. She imagined the pain he must have felt, the grief that had seemingly driven him into a life of calculated detachment. She saw the stark contrast between the vibrant, open young man in the photos and the guarded, emotionally distant man he had become. She wondered if he had ever truly processed that grief, or if he had simply buried it under layers of superficial activity. Claire found herself wanting to reach out, to connect with people in Ethan's life on a deeper level. She called his mother again, this time engaging in a longer, more heartfelt conversation. She listened patiently as his mother spoke of her worries, her hopes for Ethan, her lingering sadness about his emotional distance. Claire found herself instinctively offering words of comfort and understanding, genuinely trying to bridge the gap between Ethan and his mother. He's trying, Mrs. Miller," she said, using Ethan's voice. He has a lot on his mind." She even promised to visit soon, a promise the real Ethan would likely never have made. One afternoon, sitting in Ethan's living room, she found herself missing the simple act of reading a story to Lily. She picked up one of Ethan's thick fantasy novels, a genre she rarely read, and started reading aloud, her deep, masculine voice echoing in the empty apartment. She imagined Lily sitting beside her, listening with rapt attention. A wave of profound longing washed over her, a deep, aching desire for her daughter, for the warmth of her own home. The freedom of Ethan's life felt increasingly barren, a vast, empty landscape where her heart felt adrift. She realized that Ethan's avoidance of emotional entanglement wasn't freedom, it was a prison. A self-imposed exile from the very things that gave life meaning: love, connection, shared experience, and the boundless joy of raising a child. The fear of pain had led him to choose a path of emotional numbness, believing it would protect him, but it had only left him isolated. The cracks in their carefully constructed facades were becoming more pronounced. Ethan, experiencing the daily grind and profound love of motherhood, was shedding his cynical shell, embracing empathy and selflessness. Claire, witnessing the emptiness and pain beneath Ethan's free existence, was gaining a deeper understanding of his vulnerabilities and the underlying reasons for his chosen lifestyle. They were both learning that true freedom wasn't about the absence of responsibility, but about the choice of what to be responsible for and the courage to embrace the messiness and the beauty of those choices. The body swap was no longer just a bizarre punishment. It was a profound, involuntary act of empathy, slowly knitting together the frayed edges of their separate, yet increasingly intertwined, lives. They were moving inexorably towards a point of no return, where their understanding of each other and themselves would be irrevocably altered. The profound lessons learned in the body swap had been simmering, slowly transforming Ethan and Claire from within. Yet, nothing could have prepared them for the night that would shatter their remaining defenses and force them to confront the true meaning of love, fear, and human connection. It was a night that would prove to be the crucible, forging their newfound empathy into an unbreakable bond. The day had been unusually stressful for Ethan, still trapped in Claire's body. A major client presentation had gone awry at work, leaving him, feeling utterly drained and questioning her ability to handle Claire's demanding career. He arrived at Lily's preschool just as a torrential downpour began, soaking them both on the short dash to the car. Lily, usually cheerful, was quiet, her small hand feeling warm in Claire's as they drove home. He put it down to the bad weather and the long day. Back at the apartment, Lily seemed lethargic. She refused dinner, complaining of a headache, and her cheeks were flushed. Ethan, now acutely attuned to her subtle cues, felt a prickle of unease. He touched her forehead. It was burning hot. Panic, cold and sharp, shot through him. "Lily, sweetie, are you feeling okay?" he asked, his voice tight with worry. Lily whimpered, a small, pathetic sound that tore at his heart. "Mommy, I feel funny. My tummy hurts." He quickly took her temperature. It was dangerously high. 103 degrees Fahrenheit. Ethan's mind, usually so composed under pressure in his own life, dissolved into a chaotic mess. He had never dealt with a sick child, never had to make urgent medical decisions. His hands trembled as he tried to call Claire's pediatrician, but the line was busy. He paced the small apartment, his heart hammering against his ribs, a primal fear he'd never known gripping him. This wasn't a game he could reset, not a problem he could code his way out of. This was real, and Lily was vulnerable. "Mommy." Lily's voice was weak, barely a whisper. She started to cough, a dry, hacking sound that rattled her small frame. Ethan scooped her up, Claire's arms surprisingly strong, cradling her against his chest. She felt so tiny, so fragile, burning with fever. His own well-being, his own comfort, evaporated entirely. There was only Lily. Only the desperate, overwhelming need to protect her. He grabbed Claire's emergency bag, a small tote packed with essentials, and rushed out the door, his mind a blur of fear and frantic decision-making. The drive to the emergency room was a terrifying blur. The rain lashed against the windshield, blurring his vision, and every traffic light seemed to be against him. Lily was whimpering in the back seat, her breathing shallow and ragged. Ethan spoke to her constantly, his voice a shaky stream of reassurances, trying to keep her conscious, trying to keep himself from completely unraveling. "It's okay, sweetie. Mommy's here. We're almost there. Just a little bit longer, my brave super helper." At the hospital, The bright, sterile lights and the hushed urgency of the emergency room staff only heightened his fear. He clutched Lily tightly, refusing to let go, his eyes scanning the faces of doctors and nurses, pleading for help. They were quickly ushered into a room, and a kind-faced doctor began examining Lily, asking Ethan a series of questions he barely managed to answer coherently. What were her symptoms? When did they start? Had she been exposed to anything? He stammered, trying to recall details from Claire's life he barely knew, feeling utterly inadequate. As the doctor ran tests and the nurses administered medication, Ethan sat by Lily's bedside, holding her tiny, feverish hand. She was drifting in and out of sleep, her small body fighting against the unseen illness. The weight of his inability to truly understand or fix this was suffocating. He felt a profound helplessness, a raw, aching vulnerability that stripped away every layer of his usual self-possession. Lily stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She looked up at him, Claire, her gaze hazy with fever. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ethan leaned closer, gently stroking her forehead. "I'm here, sweetie. Mommy's right here." A single tear rolled down Lily's cheek. "Con somi bo con dinu bie. I'm scared Mommy will leave me like Daddy did." The words hit Ethan with the force of a physical blow. The air left his lungs in a ragged gasp. The casual, almost dismissive attitude he once held towards children, the arrogant proclamations about freedom from responsibility, they all crumbled into dust. He looked at Lily's innocent, trusting face, at the fear etched into her feverish features, and he saw not a burden, but a fragile, loving soul who had already known the pain of loss. He realized, with a devastating clarity, that her quiet, often demanding presence was a desperate plea for stability, for love, for reassurance that she wouldn't be abandoned again. Ethan's eyes welled up, tears blurring his vision. He hadn't cried in years, not since the loss that had led him to build his own fortress of detachment. But now, in Claire's body, holding Claire's child, his heart fractured open. He squeezed Lily's hand, his voice thick with emotion. "No, sweetie," he vowed, his throat tight. "Mommy's not going anywhere. Mommy's right here. And she'll always be here for you. Always." He said the words, and they felt profoundly true, resonating deep within his soul, transcending the body he inhabited. He wasn't just promising as Claire, he was promising as Ethan, as a man who had finally understood the depth of unconditional love. In that sterile hospital room, surrounded by the beeping of machines and the hushed whispers of the medical staff, Ethan had an epiphany. He understood that true strength wasn't about avoiding pain or responsibility, it was about facing it head-on, for the sake of someone you loved. He understood that the greatest freedom wasn't the absence of commitment, but the liberating choice to commit, fully and wholeheartedly, to the people who made life worth living. He saw Claire's life, not as a prison, but as a rich tapestry woven with threads of love, sacrifice, and boundless courage. He recognized the immense, quiet power of a mother's love, a force he had once so flippantly dismissed. He vowed, then and there, a silent, fervent promise to the universe. "If I ever get back to my own body, I will never let Claire and Lily face this kind of fear alone again. I will not let them be a single family anymore." The words were not just an echo of his newfound empathy, they were a declaration of a transformed heart. He wanted to be part of their lives, to share the burdens and the joys, to be a protector, a supporter, a presence. He wanted to be what Lily had whispered she was afraid of losing, a parent who would always be there. He realized that the freedom he had so ardently pursued was nothing but a lonely, empty road. The true freedom, the true joy, lay in connection, in responsibility, in love. And it was all right there in the small, feverish hand he held. The night at the hospital was long and agonizing for Ethan. He never left Lily's side, holding her hand, whispering reassurances, and watching over her as the medication slowly brought her fever down. By dawn, Lily was sleeping peacefully, her breathing even, her cheeks no longer flushed. The doctor assured Ethan that the worst had passed. It was a common childhood virus, but the fever had been high. Relief, so profound it made his knees weak, washed over him. He pressed a gentle kiss to Lily's forehead, a gesture now filled with an instinctive, overwhelming love. Exhausted but deeply changed, Ethan finally drifted off to sleep in the chair beside Lily's bed, still holding her small hand. He dreamt of open fields of laughter and of a warmth he had never known. At the exact same moment, across town, Claire was jolted awake in Ethan's apartment. The first thing she noticed was the absence of the stale pizza smell. The second was the unfamiliar weight of her own body, the familiar contours of her own hands as she instinctively reached for the bedside lamp. Her heart pounded, a frantic drum against her ribs. She looked down at herself, her own slender legs, her own soft skin. She scrambled to the mirror. Staring back was her face, her tired but familiar face. And her voice, when she let out a shaky gasp, was her own melodic tone. She was back. She was Claire. A wave of dizzying relief washed over her, followed by an immediate, searing anxiety. Lily. Where was Lily? Was she okay? Claire scrambled out of bed, her mind racing. She remembered the photo of Ethan's past love, the ache of his loneliness, the profound emptiness of his free life. She remembered her own yearning for Lily, for the comforting chaos of her life. The lessons of the body swap were vivid, raw. She rushed home, her heart in her throat, fumbling with her keys. The apartment was silent, too silent. A note on the fridge caught her eye, written in Ethan's, Claire's, slightly awkward handwriting. Lily in ER. High fever. Doing better now. Don't worry. I'm with her. Panic seized her again. Lily. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed her purse and ran out the door, hailing the first taxi she saw, her mind consumed with fear for her daughter. Claire burst into Lily's hospital room, her eyes wide with fear and desperate love. She saw Lily, sleeping soundly, and beside her, slumped in a chair, was Ethan. He was still in her, Claire's, body, his face pale with exhaustion, his hair disheveled. He looked up at the sound of her entrance, his, Claire's, eyes meeting hers. In that shared gaze, an entire universe of understanding passed between them. No words were needed. They had lived each other's lives, endured each other's struggles, and felt each other's pain. As Claire rushed to Lily's side, gently stroking her daughter's head, Ethan felt a familiar, dizzying shift. A strange lightness, a sense of pulling, then a jolt. He opened his eyes. He was in his own body. His strong, masculine hands, his deep voice when he cleared his throat. He looked at Claire, now in her own body, tears streaming down her face as she cradled Lily. He saw the pure, unadulterated love, the fierce protectiveness, the boundless strength that he had just experienced firsthand. He stood up, feeling a strange mix of exhilaration and trepidation. He had so much to say, so much to apologize for, so much to promise. But the words felt inadequate, too small for the monumental shift that had occurred within him. Lily stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She looked from her real mother to Ethan, a sleepy smile gracing her lips. "Mommy," she mumbled, "Captain Courage made me feel better." Then, she looked at Ethan. "And you, Uncle Ethan. You're my superhero." Ethan's heart swelled, a warmth spreading through him that was more profound than any virtual victory, any fleeting pleasure. He was no longer Mr. Unbound and Free. He was Uncle Ethan, a superhero to a little girl. Claire, her eyes still wet with tears, looked at Ethan, truly looked at him, for the first time. She saw not the arrogant bachelor, but a man who had bravely navigated the terrifying landscape of her life, who had protected her daughter in her absence, who had clearly been transformed by the experience. She saw the empathy in his eyes, the genuine concern. He took a hesitant step towards her, clutching something in his hand. It was a brown paper bag, slightly crumpled. I made breakfast," he said, his voice a little shaky, a little rough. "For you. And Lily." He pulled out 2 slightly misshapen, but clearly homemade, pancakes, a small carton of milk, and a tiny container of fresh berries. "And I I don't know how to take care of a child, he confessed, his gaze earnest, vulnerable. But I want to learn. I want to be there. Could you give me a chance? A chance to be part of your family? The rest of your family? Claire stared at him, tears still falling, but a small, incredulous laugh bubbled up from deep within her. The absurdity of the situation, the earnestness of his confession, the sheer, unimaginable change in him. It was overwhelming. But in his eyes, she saw not pity, but genuine desire, a longing for connection that mirrored her own. She saw a man who had not just walked in her shoes, but had stumbled, learned, and grown, all for the sake of her daughter. Lily, now fully awake, scrambled off the bed, her small feet pattering across the floor. She ran to Ethan, hugging his leg tightly. "Uncle Ethan, you're my superhero," she chirped, her face bright with affection. Claire's heart, once burdened and weary, felt light, filled with a hope she hadn't dared to dream of. She wiped her tears, a genuine, radiant smile blooming on her face. You made pancakes?" she asked, her voice soft with emotion. Ethan nodded, a shy, hopeful smile gracing his lips. "And I promise, no moisturizer toothpaste this time." Claire laughed, a clear, joyous sound that filled the hospital room. She extended her hand to him, a gesture of acceptance, of a new beginning. "Come on," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Let's go home. And let's eat those superhero pancakes." The camera slowly pulled back, framing the three of them, Lily, clinging to Ethan's leg, Claire looking at him with a mix of wonder and burgeoning affection, and Ethan, his eyes filled with a peace he had never known. They walked out of the hospital, a new, unlikely family, forged in the crucible of a body swap, now ready to face the world together. A new family, starting from the most insane, bewildering, and ultimately beautiful swap imaginable. Ethan, the man who once prided himself on being unbound, had found his greatest freedom in the choice to be tied, inextricably, to the love of a mother and her child. And Claire, the mother who had craved escape, had discovered that her true strength lay not in avoiding the demands of life, but in embracing the love that made those demands worth fighting for. The full moon, which had orchestrated their bizarre exchange, now hung high in the sky, a silent, knowing witness to their transformed hearts, casting its gentle, shimmering light over their hopeful new beginning.